What is Kable?
Kable is an analyst firm. We focus on IT in the public sector in the UK, and we've been around since 1990.
What is your role and responsibility?
I lead our central government research stream at Kable, and currently my research agenda is looking at things like digital by default, what's happening in the departments as they move to digital, as they try to deal with their legacy problems. I'm also focusing a lot on how government is trying to aggregate its buying power using procurement vehicles like frameworks and including G-Cloud.
So you're obviously a very well-informed observer of developments like G-Cloud. From where you're sitting, what does Kable think of the progress of G-Cloud?
I think as a framework, G-Cloud has performed astonishingly well. It's only been around for 2 and a bit years, and in that time it's grown to deliver a kind of annualised level of spend, which is it compares incredibly well to some of the most successful frameworks out there in the public sector. We think it's doing the kind of equivalent of about 320 million a year, which is very, very good. Mm-hmm. So as a vehicle for procurement, it's performed very well. I think there is a question, a live question about what it's being used to procure. Originally, G-Cloud was set up with the idea that it was going to help government organisations move to the cloud. It was going to make it easy for government to buy cloud services. And certainly it has done that, but there is a kind of question mark over the types of services that are being bought via G-Cloud, which are very, very skewed towards typical people-oriented services, so consulting, systems integration, for example. There's even some staff spend that is going through G-Cloud. It's not necessarily the as-a-service technologies that we traditionally associate with cloud.
So there is less real hardware, software, comms, kit being bought from the G-Cloud than perhaps we might originally have liked?
Yes, I think that's probably fair. But you know, there is a question, is that necessarily a bad thing? And I don't think it is necessarily a bad thing. What G-Cloud has proved is that government can make it easy for buyers to aggregate their spending and to buy in a very standardised, commoditised way. Mm-hmm. The fact that they're buying services this way, I think that's probably a positive thing. Whereas in the past, governments would have had to go through lengthy procurement processes, which would have meant that a lot of that spend would have gone to the larger players, whereas now they can do it quickly and cheaply. It's going to a more diverse range of suppliers.
One of the values of G-Cloud when it started off was this idea of opening up the marketplace, lowering the barriers of entry, changing the kind of mix of suppliers. Does Kable think that is happening?
Certainly via G-Cloud, yes, that is happening. Although it would be wrong to say that G-Cloud is a SME-only shop, because it's not. Even though the vast majority of the suppliers are on there as SMEs, actually we can see that some very established names are doing some quite good business through there. So IBM, for example, the third biggest beneficiary of G-Cloud. That's interesting. You can also find Capgemini on there. You know, plenty of large names.
Critics of the G-Cloud process, which include some of its biggest fans, sometimes kind of say that the kind of, as it were, pound amount that's being spent is still very small compared to those kind of massive multi-billion pound ongoing contracts. How should we feel about that kind of criticism? Is that a fair one?
It's a fair one, but I think we need to be realistic and compare like with like. G-Cloud is the perfect vehicle for procuring relatively small packages of services and doing it quickly and not necessarily having long contracts. It's about small packages. But if you think of central government and the big transactional systems that power, for example, our tax and benefit system, these tend to run on a much for longer lengths. They tend to be very, very, very large contracts, and that's because we're dealing with very complex systems, lots of legacy. So need to compare like with like.
In terms of the awareness of G-Cloud and the digital marketplace in the wider public sector, what does Kable think is happening there?
The numbers show quite clearly that G-Cloud is still primarily a central government show. So local government particularly is underrepresented in terms of G-Cloud spending. So there's great potential for local government to increase its spend via G-Cloud. We can see that already a few local authorities such as Bristol and Hounslow, for example, are doing a lot with G-Cloud and kind of proving that it's possible. I think police and education are two other sectors that could look to increase.
NHS?
The health, interesting, is already doing a fair amount with G-Cloud, but yes, there's absolutely more potential there too. Department of Health is one of the biggest spenders actually.
Is the reason that the wider public sector is perhaps not as engaged, is it simply an awareness issue? I read lots of surveys that say these guys don't know about the G-Cloud, or are there other reasons that might be holding people back?
So the reasons that would hold buyers back from procuring via the G-Cloud are probably similar everywhere. There are probably worries, I imagine, about is it really okay to buy in this way? G-Cloud really does make it so easy. It's one step away from buying from a catalogue almost, it's been said.
Right.
And I think there are some buyers simply worry, is this okay? Buyers are very used to running very formal, long-winded processes, OJU and so forth, and it feels unfamiliar. So there is definitely a culture shift there. In terms of choosing from a wider supplier pool too, I imagine there are worries about capability, worries about security. But as we can see, once buyers accept that G-Cloud is okay, we can see that buyers can ramp up their spending very, very quickly. If you look at the Home Office, for example, clearly, some of the most sensitive systems and concerns going are managed by the Home Office.
Yes.
They've spent about 52 million via G-Cloud so far, so it can be done. I think awareness is one of those things that takes time to build. Again, G-Cloud started in a central government world, and that's where all the talk has been. Awareness is building. I think we will see change.
To sum up our discussion here at Think Cloud for Vendors, what is your advice as an informed expert commentator on the marketplace? If I'm a supplier who's not yet engaged with the G-Cloud process, is there any best practice I should be following to make it the most effective engagement I can?
So I think the marketing around G-Cloud in the supplier community has been very successful in that it's encouraged a very large number of suppliers to come forward quickly. The current iteration of G-Cloud has over 1,500 suppliers on it. But it's really important as a supplier to remember that just because you're on the G-Cloud does not mean you will win business. And in fact, only around 420 of those have ever won anything at all. There's also a huge range in terms of the amounts of business being won via G-Cloud. At the top end, most successful supplier has done over 15 million. At the bottom end, well, as we know, there are hundreds that have done zero and
right.
also very small sums. Okay, so what can we take away from this? G-Cloud is not a sales and marketing channel. It's not going to do your job for you. It's a procurement vehicle. So if you want to sell to government, getting on the G-Cloud is not enough. You still need to do the basic job of sales and marketing, which means engaging with your buyers, getting out, meeting them, becoming familiar with the public sector, and ideally, honing your focus on one particular part of the public sector where you think that you can build a really good story. And once you've got an idea of the kind of solutions that your customers are looking for, who you're selling to, only then go to G-Cloud and make sure your offering really stands up what you have to offer.
So just getting on G-Cloud is not enough. You have to. It's an opening, but then you have to really kind of push the door open.
Yes, that's right. It's an opening, but not a close.
Got it. Thank you very much.